Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection,
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of House Resolution 240 to condemn Russia's blatantly hostile actions last month, downing a United States Air Force drone, downing one of our United States military aircraft. Think about the seriousness of that. On March 14th, while flying in international airspace over the Black Sea, a U.S. Air Force Reaper drone was attacked by 2 Russian fighter jets. Yes, it was attacked. The 2 jets flew in front of it. At one point, even dumped fuel onto the drone. Eventually, one of the Russian jets hit the drone's propeller, sent it crashing into the Black Sea. Let's talk about what this really was. Was this an American aircraft? Yes, it was. Was this an American aircraft flying in international airspace? Yes, it was. Was this an American aircraft flying in international airspace that was taken down as a result of Russian pilots' purposeful actions? Yes, it was. There is no version of the world in which this cannot be deemed acceptable, unless that's in Joe Biden's world, apparently. Let's compare and contrast the response of the Kremlin to the response of the White House on this attack. Vladimir Putin rewarded the 2 fighter pilots with medals for a job well done. Think about that. President Biden ordered altered flight patterns to avoid future conflicts with Russia. That's the difference in the 2 responses. We're having a lot of conversation about America being violated by foreign adversaries, the last bill and now this one. The Kremlin, they were sent a clear message by what took place, that this type of behavior, they deemed it commendable. They pinned medals on the chests of their fighter pilots. They rewarded them. The White House sent the clear signal that they're going to be bullied and they're going to be backing away. They responded with weakness, compromised our intelligence operations by moving us further from what we wanted to observe. When we were just debating a bill about China surveying us over our own territory with their balloon. These are the differences of what's going on in the world right now. By altering flight patterns and sending drones in the Black Sea further to the south, the Biden administration has degraded our ability to collect intelligence on Russian forces in the region. To put it simply, Putin lashed out. Very unfortunately, President Biden backed down, and now America is less safe. Vladimir Putin does not get a veto over U.S. military operations in international airspace or sovereign Ukrainian airspace, and yet President Biden seems determined to give him one. This is just the next domino to fall, in my opinion. How would the president respond if China took similar action against our aircraft in the South China Sea or in Taiwan? President Biden is telegraphing to our adversaries that the U.S. will back down in the face of the slightest provocation. He's giving Vladimir Putin validation that he needs, that he can simply threaten escalation in order to intimidate others into backing down. And he draws no red lines. This resolution condemns Russia's attack. It reaffirms that the U.S. will not be intimidated, something that we have to reaffirm in this body given what's going on. Certainly not when it comes to operating drones in international airspace. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this resolution, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Putin's Russia has abandoned all the international systems that help countries interact and help build good faith and greater security. As someone who believes in the power of diplomacy and dialogue as a path to peace, the state of today's Russia is tragic and testing of the international community's resolve. But I'm so thankful that President Biden is indeed more responsible than Mr. Putin. It is that kind of responsibility that is truly important, and that we make sure that we are utilizing diplomacy along with our allies together, not America alone, not America by itself, but America and its friends. That's what that restraint. You know, I can recall, if you have a red line, it's easy to draw a line. But the person that's most reserved steps back. And if someone truly crosses that line, the United States is ready. That Russia ignores rules and standards, it's really not new. It's not surprising. But it has gotten to become more consequential and detrimental. We've seen Russia's ill-advised and criminal behavior into Ukraine. That's why the United States, under President Biden's leadership, has created the strong bond with our NATO and European allies and others all across the world. But again, when I think of March 14th and the Russian pilot's decision to release jet fuel upon American surveillance drone and clip the aircraft, it indeed was a reckless move that caused the drone to crash into the Black Sea. It was an unprofessional and dangerous maneuver. And it marked the first time since the Cold War that Russia has downed a U.S. aircraft. This incident added to the already heightened tensions between the United States and Russia as Vladimir Putin continued his war of aggression in Ukraine. And while our pilots and military work carefully to avoid such incidents, again, prudence, responsibility. I don't want to be like Vladimir Putin or the Russians. Don't want to imitate them. But Russia is about to play with fire. So thankfully, we have a professional military that knows the power of restraint. But this resolution rightfully condemns the March 14th incident and lets them know that we're watching and we will not be silent about it, especially here in the United States Congress. So I encourage all of my colleagues to support this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Williams, the submarine driver. Their colleagues affectionately refer to them as bubbleheads. He is the author of this resolution. 4 minutes.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am equally honored to stand here with the gentleman and fellow veteran, Mr. Mast, and as well as my New York colleague, Mr. Meeks. America has always stood up to bullies. I'm a veteran of the Cold War, and for half a century, our nation stood against the tyranny of the Soviet Union. I volunteered to serve in the Navy, making 6 strategic deterrent patrols in the Pacific aboard a nuclear submarine. The mission was clear: to project strength, to stand ready to defend our nation and our allies, and to deter the aggression of our enemies. Today, we are reminded what happens if American leaders fail in that mission. The Russian military, emboldened by their invasion of Ukraine, making veiled threats of nuclear escalation, suppressing the voices even of their own people. They have deliberately provoked this nation, you and me. On March 14th, 2023, one of our MQ-9 Reaper drones, flying safely in international airspace and in accordance with international law, was attacked by 2 Russian Su-27 fighter jets. These lawless pilots dumped their fuel, hitting our aircraft in mid-flight, forcing an American reconnaissance asset to ditch in international waters. I remain shocked, not only at the unprofessional and reckless nature of the Russian pilots, but also of the Russian government's accolades and awards that it heaped upon them. Mr. Speaker, I am reminded from my naval service that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. That's exactly why I have proposed House Resolution 240, a resolution condemning the reckless actions of the Russian military, resulting in a loss of a U.S. aircraft. The resolution is simple. It recognizes the events that took place, highlighted by the declassified video from European Command. It resolves that the House of Representatives condemns the Russian military's actions and reaffirms that the United States will not be deterred from operating our drones in the Black Sea. This resolution speaks not for a single political ideology, but on behalf of all Americans who desire peace. I want to take a moment to thank Representative Costa, who has joined me in this bipartisan effort of standing up to tyranny and the direct act of aggression against our military. At this time of escalating tensions around the world, we must speak out against brazen provocation. Today, the world can see that Americans across the political spectrum speak with one voice in condemnation of this act. By standing together here on the floor of the House of Representatives, we project strength by standing together. We reassure our allies that we are committed to defend ourselves and our friends. And together, we will ensure the peace through deterrence and unity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing.
Gentleman is recognized.
Let me thank Congressman Williams for this resolution, along with Mr. Costa, again working strong in a bipartisan way. Congressman Williams' resolution appropriately condemns Russia's irresponsible and provocative drowning of a U.S. surveillance drone over the Black Sea. It lets Russia and the entire world know that the United States House of Representatives stands strongly together in condemning the actions of the pilot that downed the U.S. surveillance drone. And it says unequivocally that the United States of America will stand together and working together with our friends and allies against the provocative and, I believe, criminal actions of Vladimir Putin. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the remainder of my time. In closing, I want to thank the gentleman from New York, Mr. Williams, for introducing this important resolution. I believe that this chamber has to stand firmly against Russian aggression. I believe very firmly that the United States of America has to have big, giant brass stones. And if our aggressors show that they have bigger brass stones than what we do, then we will not be the leader of the free world. And I very much fear what is taking place right now. I will just say it like that. I very much fear what is taking place and allowed to take place in this world. I urge all members to support this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.